And we are live. Welcome, sprinters. It's so good to see you. I am joined today by Bas Grolleman, my fellow Dutchie, and you should be able to see him now. Hi, Bas. Just wave to
Hey
everyone.
all.
Please, well, let's see. I am just going to see if I can see us, if we are. Let's see.
Doing a quick double check,
Yeah, okay.
making
Everything is
everybody part of the
working on
live stream.
YouTube. I've just checked on YouTube. This is also a little bit new technology for me. I used to be on a very slow MacBook, so I would never try to do anything like YouTube live stream, but everything is working, boss. So
Cool.
great. Okay, let's get started with today's session. I want to thank everyone who is live here joining Bus and myself as we're going to talk about simple queries. So Logseq's built-in query language. Maybe this is the first week you're joining us. The first week, last week, was all about how do you structure learning sprints like this. We are sprinting very fast. So in just 2 weeks, we're going to look at a lot of use cases. I've been already trying out quite a bit of queries. I've been running into bugs, into issues, but luckily I can just already tell you that a lot of updates are on their way for Logseq. So having that out of the way, I'm really happy that Bas is here. You may know Bas from Tools on Tech on Twitter or YouTube. And he talks a lot about Logseq, but also other tools and mostly workflows. So how do you use different personal knowledge management tools? Bas uses, I think, his tools quite a bit for content creation, which is one of
Yeah.
the most popular use cases in this sprint. And Bas, before I take over this entire session, please introduce
hmm
yourself.
Yeah. So, boss, I run the YouTube channel Tools on Tech. Started like 3 years ago, and I talk a lot about like personal knowledge, workflows, and also how people like take control of their own flow. Right. If you're like in a business setting, that's my most target audience. There's a lot of things coming your way, and I want people to be empowered so to take control of what they're actually doing instead of just blindly following whatever's on the board. And the best way to do that is have your own knowledge on point and your own task list on point, so you can make decisions on what to do next.
Yeah, that's great. And there are many different use cases in the sprints. So looking at the ways people want to use queries, it really goes from I just want to know what is in my Logseq notes collection to I want to prep meals with it and everything in between. Maybe before we get started, and also Bas, to give us a little bit of a direction in our conversation today, is to look at some of the most popular use cases. Let's see. I don't know if you are able to see my screen, Bas, now.
Not yet, but I'm also trying to see if I can sneak into the YouTube set.
Okay, okay. If, by the way, for people who have questions, you can drop them in the chat to make it easier for us to find your question. Please start your question with the word question. We'll get to it for sure. But look, I just wanted to have a look at what are some of the most popular use cases among the sprinters in this query sprint. And by far, the three most popular use cases are task and project management, content creation, and learning new skills. And I think, I don't know how it works for you, Bas, but task management and project management is definitely something that I want to use Logseq for. I have already been using Logseq for content creation. Um, what have you been using Logseq for so far? And also with an eye on queries. So what kind of workflows do you use Logseq for that you also use queries for?
Yeah, so the main workflows that I have is in a business setting. So I have a lot of information coming my way, and I want to be able to use filters to find information back when I need it. One of the most used ones I have currently at my current project is that I make blocks that I mark with people, And then inside that person's page, I have a query that shows me anything that I have outstanding. So if I need to discuss something with person A in Logseq in my daily journal, I'll just write Control Enter to make it a to-do, a task, write a link to the name of the person, and then write whatever I need to ask them. And then next time when I speak to them, I always open their page and I can immediately see like, oh, I still need to discuss this with this specific person. And the same thing is also for meeting types. So I have things like the daily stand-up. So I have the same thing for the daily stand-up. If I start my day, I click open the daily stand-up page and it shows me anything that I need to discuss during the daily stand-up. And it's the same for refinement and retrospectives or specific meetings. Every meeting has its own page. And on all these pages, I basically use the same simple query, which is current page, open task, and related to this page. And that always gives me like when people mention something, I know that it will pop up when I need it and not sooner.
Yeah. So very simple. Your approach. Mostly you use linked references, so you don't overcomplicate things too much, and then you also have some simple queries set up to show you very quickly what are all the tasks that are related to this page. Like wherever I've mentioned this page, I want to see all the tasks related to it. And maybe we can do a little bit of a live coding today, because this is actually something that I only discovered this week or this weekend, that you could put in the current page variable, so to say, and then dynamically use the same query but on every page, but then dynamically it will fetch anything related to that page. I want to dive, before we go too deep, I want to dive a little bit into your journey with Logseq, also with queries, because you said that you, at some point, you spent maybe an afternoon or a day, or maybe even more, learning advanced queries, so Datalog. And that is something we're going to do next week in the learning sprint. But even last week, I already noticed that people are already dabbling with it. And I think sometimes, or maybe often, it's a little bit overkill to learn Datalog, whereas maybe you just want to retrieve some tasks that are related to a project like you just explained. Could you tell a little bit about your journey, how you maybe went a little bit overboard at first with learning, and then you scale down and you settle down, okay, this is actually what I need. And maybe people can learn from this, that they don't go on a learning binge and then end up not using that knowledge. And instead, maybe they could have just built some simple systems instead.
Yeah. So for me, I'm like an engineer, so I can program, I can write query language. I've been a database administrator for a couple of years, so I know my SQLs. So when it came to like getting data outside of Logseq, I really wanted to know like, okay, how does this work? And I used a few simple queries, but it was like, okay, sometimes they didn't work, sometimes I didn't understand them. And then I was like, I really need to figure this out. So best way to do that is to just dive deep and spend a couple of days figuring it out. I was hitting one of the problems there is that there is some documentation, but it's always behind. Logseq is constantly growing, so the documentation either doesn't feature all the sets, and it's very much written by engineers and not so much by end users, which is a problem if you're not an engineer. So that was one of the reasons why I also made like my advanced query video about it, because I really wanted to give something where I just go step by step over like a complex query that I built. But I also discovered after I learned all these advanced query things that, with the exception of not being able to give it a title, 9 out of 10 times I could easily handle it with a simple query. And then path of least resistance sets in. So I need a query and I'm like, I can write a perfectly tailored query, or I can get one that's like 95% of what I need, and I'm going to write it in 2 seconds and it will probably work, because less text means less chance for bugs. So I started to notice that I started using the same simple queries everywhere, because some things are just so useful to me, and other things you can't really think of ahead. So you're making a query because you have a use case, and the use case needs to be there first before you build the query around it, because, well, it's fun building like complex queries. If I'm not using them, then why did I build them, right?
Yeah, exactly. By the way, there I saw also a question in the chat by Nick. People want to see that video, so maybe if you can link to some of the stuff that you mentioned. I don't know if you are able to open the chat. Otherwise, you can put it in in the interview chat, and then I will post it to YouTube. So that is also a possibility. So yeah, a few points that I fully agree with, and actually one of my reasons for running this learning sprint is to lay bare where things are not working as they should, where things are hard to understand. So for example, with the documentation, I fully agree on the need for better documentation because, as you say, the current documentation is very much, it's a very bare bones reference guide with maybe a few examples. And if people don't know what we're talking about, let's share my screen. Let's see. People should be able to see my screen now. Let's double check on, yes, okay, on YouTube. Still getting used to this technology, so sorry everyone. If you go to docs.logseq.com and then you scroll all the way down to, let's say, to queries, then you'll see first a definition. Obviously, if you've never been here, check out this page. You get a little bit of a sense of what is possible. But I think one very important thing that it doesn't explain is how does query language work? This assumes that you know basically Boolean logic. If you're not familiar with Boolean logic, I hope we'll get to talk a little bit about this today. But yeah, but if I hear you, you have a very adventurous mindset. I think as an engineer, as someone who already feels comfortable with this technology, I think among the attendees here or people watching this later, there are many people who don't feel comfortable with this. Once they see a query, they feel like, oh, now I need to become a programmer to work with Logseq. Can you maybe, because also you have this experience already, could you maybe give a definition? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but give a definition of what is a query language. So when you think of a database, when you think of a system that contains data, that is labeled in some way. So there are some characteristics about this data. Let's start from here. What is a query language exactly? So why does a database need a query language?
Yeah, so like a database needs a query language because you need some way to tell a computer what to look for. And computers by definition aren't intelligent. So you can't just tell it something and then it will find the right data, though it's getting a lot better looking at current AI advances. I mean, I've been playing with Midjourney, creating like complete pictures from a couple of words. So why can't it just make queries, right, with the same couple of words? But until that time, and if you want like exact control, and with data you usually want exact answers, you'll need some way to tell a computer this is what I need. And the simplest query out there, and that's the one that most of us use every day, is if we go to Google and we type in a search phrase. That's a query.
Yes.
But you can add stuff to that. So anybody that has dived into this, for example, didn't want any Pinterest results in it, which is one of my pet peeves, is I type in a search query and I say like minus site, and then I add something like Pinterest. It's like a phrase for it. Or I say, I'm looking for ice cream, but not ice cubes. Mm-hmm. These are really simple examples of queries where you tell a search engine, hey, I want all the ice creams, but I don't want anything related to ice cubes. And queries become more complex depending on how precise you want your data. So database queries, for example, can get very complex because they have to go through a lot of data. And using the optimized query, you can also tell a computer to work faster. So to tell it like, hey, get this small subset of data and then filter out the rest of the data. Yeah. Instead of if you would ask it the other way around, you would get like a whole bunch of data and then it would have like a slow process going through that. But that's like advanced usage, right? Where you have to optimize, and you only do that if you have to run a query very often. If you only run a query once, then you don't care that it takes 10 or 20 seconds if it's only once. But if I have to run that every time I open Logseq, then I want my query to be blinding fast. Yeah. Because I also have to wait constantly.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to play the beginner here and try to explain everything as far as how you explained it, and hopefully dumb it down a little bit to for people like me. So I think thing that is important to note, because we started out from the premise, okay, we have a database of nodes and now we want to search it. And then you explained about query languages. This first thing may confuse people, but Logseq is a database. So even though on your file system you may see markdown files, there is still a database running within Logseq that constantly creates and reads these markdown files or edits them. And in that database, there's a bunch of metadata, so data about that data available. So for example, when you have a to-do and that you put a to-do in the status doing, and you have the time tracking option enabled, as long as that task is in status doing, it will accumulate basically seconds. So there will be metadata, a duration created about that to do. So that is just one example of Logseq being a database and then having some data about individual blocks within Logseq. So that is the most basic premise where we start from. And then obviously the question becomes, how do you search this database? So you have some logic. You, as Bas already explained, you just like in Google, you say, I want to see all results, because Google is also a database, and the search bar that you use in Google is basically you searching the database of all the pages that Google has indexed. And then you say, I want to see all pages that mention this word, but as an example, if it mentions this word, I don't want to see that result in the search results. And the same way Logseq queries work. So you have a really big box of data, and then you say, I want to filter everything out that does not meet certain conditions, so that do not contain this word, or if they contain that word, then I don't want to see them. So this gives you a little bit of flexibility. I want to show very quickly something that, let's see, that someone created in the learning sprint. So this is the forum for the learning sprint. So if you go to discuss.logseq.com and you scroll down to learning sprints, you'll be able to go to the query learning sprint. And there is an article titled Boolean Logic One-on-One. And this explains basically the three main filters that you use in Logseq queries. So you can say, I want to see, using the AND filter, you can say, I want to see all the blocks that contain AND word A, and word B, and word C. So only when they all contain those three values, then those blocks should show in your results. Then there's or, then there's not. Obviously, we're not going really deep into this right now, because I think you should take your time and learn about this yourself. And then at the end, I've also added some additional resources. So there's this Boolean algebra tutorial. I really recommend it, that you have a look here. So I'm just going to put this link in the chat. And then, Bas, I want to ask you something, because I saw something pop up in the chat about query languages. So as I already said in the introduction, there are basically two query languages in Logseq. So you have Datalog, the advanced queries, and then you have so-called simple queries. But correct me if I'm wrong, aren't simple queries just a simplification of what are actually Datalog queries? So under the hood, those simple queries are transformed into Datalog. So basically, the query language of Logseq is Datalog. That is the language. And then Logseq has created basically its own simplified query language that makes it easier to basically create these queries. Is that correct?
Partially, because what we do with the simple query languages is that Clojure, the language which Logseq is based on, has a way to pre-program queries. And that's what we do. So we had like a couple of internal queries in Logseq that simplify searching for certain data sets. And that's made available to the end user. So instead of them having to write like a whole complex query, you can just do one of those functions. And that's what whole programming is about, right? You write something that's complex, you put it in a function and say, here's the function, and now you can use it too without having to understand all the code that's under it. While you were explaining, I think that one of the things that's very important to know if you're doing any type of queries in Logseq is to understand that Clojure has a bit of a different format than regular programming languages, and I'm pretty sure that confuses a lot of people that have seen other languages and are getting started. And that is that Clojure always starts with the function name instead of it being in the middle. So normally you would say something like A and B in a programming language, but because Logseq is based on Clojure, it's actually written as and then you see A and B.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a weird thing. Like if you don't know that, that was something that tripped me up, and that mostly because I've been in so many languages that everything or and the include space property, it all starts with the name of what you want to do, and then the variables get added, instead of what other languages do, where those things are usually like in the middle, where they sound logical. So even like normal calculations, I think I said it in one of the videos. Normally you write 1 plus 2. But in Clojure, you write plus 1, 2, which is weird for most people that aren't used to Clojure, as I was when I started figuring this stuff out.
Yeah. But what would you say to someone who has zero experience with any of this, who is like, see, now I have to become a programmer if I want to use Logseq. Why can it not just be like Notion? So maybe that's more of a question for me or for the team. It's like, why can't we just point and click? Because in Notion, if you want to build a filtered view, you just have a table of data. And then you say, oh, I want to see only the data that has this value in this column or in this field. And that makes it very easy. Basically, we are trying to do the same in Logseq, but we're writing out the filters, right? So, but what would you say to someone who says, I don't want to become a programmer, I just want to find my notes? How far should they go? Like, should they go and understand Clojure, or is it just enough to understand a few basic filters and then you can do basically 95% of your use cases?
I think that one's a two-parter. One is if you have a couple of example simple queries, that will probably get you 90% of the way, which is good. But I also think looking at end users, like I don't mind writing queries, but Logseq definitely, if they want to start talking to a broader audience, needs some kind of drop down, some way of like visual query builder, or some type of autocomplete, so that when you type query and you say like open, that you get options like, hey, do you want to and or not, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But most ideally, it would be some drop down thing where people can search in. I know that's a lot of work, but for a lot of people, that would really help them to get the power out of Logseq without having to dive into like a couple of videos. I mean, I love making videos, don't get me wrong, but I would love people even more if they could use Logseq without having to think about it too much.
Yes. Yeah. So a few points of feedback if I listen to this. Sorry, I need to. Okay, back. I think a few very important points of feedback for us. First, we need to have a tool that makes it easier to write consistent queries. So like in a code editor, when you maybe write something that is available in a library, again, I don't want to become too technical, but in a good code editor, you will see all the options that are for like all the functions that are available. In the same vein, you will want to see not just when you write a query, the page autocomplete, but also maybe the filter option autocomplete. So when you start writing B, after you've opened a parentheses, that you see between, for example, as an option. That I think is very important. And then also some kind of debugger. So if a query is not working, that you can see on what, like, obviously we're not writing multi-line queries when we're writing a simple query, but what is the part of the query that is causing a problem? Because currently you just get a undefined error when you get when your query is not working, and then you have to figure out for yourself what is wrong. So I think those are a few things. And then absolutely a visual query builder would be even better, that you say, I just want to select, like given these arguments, so the and, the or, etc. And then when you click apply, that will build basically the query for you. Although I think that could still be a plugin project maybe in the intermediate. Like I agree with you that it should be built in, but just spitballing here, I think it could be a good way, solution for this problem in the meanwhile. I see some questions. Let's see. And this is something that I should answer because Nick is asking. Let's see if I can add it to the broadcast. Can you please briefly talk about how to work with children blocks in queries? Example, show all blocks marked with Q, but exclude if its children have A. So, Nick, this is a very good question. This is actually something I've been struggling a lot with this week. There's currently a bug in the query engine that it does not properly look up or down the branch. So when you put in the query values, you say, I want to see all the blocks that have that have hashtag Q, but have not hashtag A. That will currently it will only look if those values are in the same block. It's a bug. In the next release, this should be fixed. So no matter if your hashtag A is 10 levels down in the branch, it should still be able to filter on this value. Maybe I'm talking very abstractly now. Let's see if I can do a little demo to show what I'm talking about. Let's see. Does this sound familiar, by the way, when I say this, Bas, or like I have no idea? Let's see.
It does sound familiar. It was something that I had to grasp in the beginning as well, where you have then a marker on a level, and then if you go down a couple of indents, then those are included in the same marker.
Yeah.
So you can also filter on that. So you say like A plus B, and then if one of the parents has A and the children have B, then it would still return in the query. And that should be able to be done in reverse, right? So you say like, hey, it has A, but it's not B. Then you should get everything except the ones in B. And I do use a simplified version of that, because when I'm writing my scripts in Logseq, I mark them as green screen or behind computer or outside. And then I make filters that say current page, because I only want results from that page, and then say green screen. And then I get all the blocks that are marked as green screen and their sub blocks. And then I know, okay, this I need to do in front of the green screen, and then I can easily do my work.
Yeah, maybe if you're up for it, maybe you can show a little bit in a moment, because I think people will be curious to see that. Because that is basically, if you think of like common productivity or task management frameworks, like getting things done, then you have context. So for example, your context is you have a green screen, and you want to record all the scenes that you have that you need a green screen for, so you can batch stuff. So that if you have a query that can show you everything that you need to do in front of a green screen, when you have everything set up, you can just bring up that query and do that in one batch. But before we go to that, I want to give a very concrete example of what is currently not working well with child blocks and filters. So when you see this branch, it's quite a bit of information to digest, but this is what I was working on yesterday and the day before that I ran into some issues, and this should be fixed in one of the upcoming versions. I still haven't tested it, but this is what the engineers told me. So there's a few things that you see here. I have a few sub branches in this main branch. I have it heavily tagged, and then I say I want to see all the tasks here. So all the tasks that have status to do and that have hashtag or link project/IT strategy/2023. Okay, so see what pops up. Only this block that has both the to do and the link in the same block. That is fine. This task should appear, but there should be another task that should appear. This to do. Why? Because it's a to do, and it has, through the parent block, it has the product/IT strategy/2023, but the issue is it's 2 levels up. And there's currently a bug in Logseq that says, well, if or that causes that when a tag is several levels up in the branch, the query will not be able to associate them somehow. What will be in the future release is no matter where in the branch this tag is, as long as the tag is somewhere up in the branch, then any child block will be tagged with the tag from the parent block. I hope I explained it in the least abstract way this way, but this is something that annoyed the heck out of me for such a long time. And it seems like finally we are getting a release where this is fixed. And this obviously also applies to the linked references, because the linked references work basically in the same way as queries. And why is that? Because I can say here in this filter section, I can say I want to filter in. I only want to see the blocks that have to do, or I want to see the blocks, like I don't want to see any block that has the keyword to do. So, and by the way, if you're a little bit behind with Logseq versions, as you can see here, we've implemented something very neat. You can now finally search your filter values. That was also something that was annoying the heck out of me, and I think of some other people. So yeah.
Wait, is that implemented? Because I'm being really happy right now.
Yes, that is. So this is implemented.
Writing.
This is implemented right now. So make sure when you, so I am now on version 0.7.7. You can check it via here, the 3 dots, and then settings. Obviously, I'm on a custom theme now, but the 3 dots should be here. And what else? Yeah, but it's likely it will, if you start up Logseq and there's a new version available, it will say so here in the top bar. All right. And then let's see another question. Maybe you can answer this one, Bas. Let's see. So Ed is asking, is there a way to restrict a simple query to a given namespace? So not just a page, but a namespace. And I know there's some work behind the scenes. We're doing some work on reworking namespaces, how they see at the end of the page in the hierarchy section. But do you know this, Bas? Is this even possible currently with simple queries?
I don't, because that's something where I have to be less specific. I would expect it to be something like namespace/star, but I would have to dive into it and debug it a bit. But I'm going to put it on the list because I want to see if I can figure that out. I have been using namespace very limited until now, so I haven't made any queries related to that yet. Wish I could have like an answer, but I'm going to get an answer. Because that sounds like an interesting query to work on. So I'm going to put that on my task list.
Yeah, let's see. I see there's a forum post about this.
Always a forum post.
There's always a forum post. So if you're, so there was a feature request about a namespace query to retrieve lower levels in the namespace hierarchy. And then Alex, who we'll have on next week, says if you have a namespace like this with task on the page, let's see, let's just go to the post. It's easier. Let's see. So this is an advanced query. So if the question by Ed, is there a way to restrict a simple query to a given namespace? The answer seems to be no, because it's in advanced query. Do stay tuned because there's a update coming on for the namespaces. Bas, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at that, but the way it's formatted, that looks very much like the simple queries in advanced queries setup. So I wouldn't be surprised if you can actually use that in your simple queries.
Okay. So let's see, I will put the link in the chat so people can check it out themselves. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Oh. Just getting the link. All right, let's see what other questions there are, because I think we'll just launch into Q&A unless you have something set up that you wanted to show, because I did ask if you were willing to show maybe some queries that you have set up for either workflows.
I have a simple query shared right now for one of my scripts.
All right. Yeah, I'm sharing it now on YouTube.
And this is like very simple as well. Like, so this is one of my video scripts that I write in Logseq. And as you can see, here's like a lot of text in different layers. And then I mark them, and I got a couple of markers like studio and B-roll and stock footage. So for example, stock footage is something that I need to look up on Storyblocks. And in this example, I've only had a filter for B-roll. I used to usually write them as I need them, because I used to have like a template with 5 queries, but it just made it confusing for me.
Yeah.
And because they're so easy to write, I just write them as I need them. And
Yeah.
as you can see here, this is a simple query. So it says query and in front of it, so not in the middle. B-roll, which hooks back to the tag, and then current page. And that will give me from the current page all the blocks that are marked B-roll. And they're really simple in this case, because the B-roll ones are just one line. But if there's sub under it, you can click on it, or you can open it, and you can see like the whole text, which is usually what I need if there's like anything that I need to write on it. So let's take a different example and go like, hey, I would like to get anything from the studio with a capital S. That should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So then I usually just change it. So like studio, and as you can see, of course, because it's a link, it auto-completes. And then this shows me like all the studio things that I have. And there you can see like all the subtext in there. Now, this is maybe a bit much, because nearly everything studio, I usually don't filter on that, but just go through the list.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that where it's really useful for me, like green screen, because they have to set up the whole green screen and do it. B-roll. And I love the stock one, because that means that I go to Storyblocks only once to get all the stock footage, instead of going to the site every time, opening it and going through it as I'm doing it. This is like a query that I use very often when I'm writing stuff. Another thing for me that I use a lot is the simple query for things like the book. This is also super simple. It says page property. It goes for type book. And as you can see, it's not much. Like, it's definitely the definition of a simple query, right? Page property, type book. Mm-hmm. The reason why I use page property here is because if you use a page property, you get different results, meaning that because it's all pages, you get these nice clickable links to pages with information. Yes. And then if I click on it, you can see which information. So type book is in there. That's what these things get filtered on. And the rest of the information that I get, I can then throw in a table, and then here switch on and off what I want to see. And I use this data structure very often because I just need like a data setup. I think I made one this morning for games, because I wrote down like my third game that I wanted to play. And I said like, okay, I need to have that. And I did like this in 5 minutes, where I said like, okay, these are the games that I already put in, and it's not a long list yet because I just started with it. And I think it's pretty simple still, like type game, status to do, because I want to do it. I put the series in. Probably when I have a little more time, I'm going to add pictures to it, because I like having like an overview with like covers on it. And then you still see like the type game here, while it's unnecessary because everything in this thing is game. So I'm going to switch that one off if it's in between type. Click that off. So now I just see the state, to do and done. And sometimes when I have like a long list and I just want to see the things that are on to do, then I make 2 of these queries where I say and then say state is to do, and the other one state is done. If I want to make a separate list for it, or I just sort them by just clicking on the top right and going for it. If I'm looking for a new game to play.
Yeah. So my main takeaway from this is because simple queries are so fast to write, just write them in a moment as you need them. And once you internalize the knowledge, and you understand the outline structure, and you understand that, okay, when a block contains this tag, it's just combining values, just combining links basically. And then from the next version onwards, hopefully structuring them a little bit more in branches and creating more complex queries by combining basically values from within a branch, so you can really become more and more specific, that you only see maybe a block, maybe you only have one little part that you need to B-roll, for example, and that way you can really very quickly drill down using queries. I like this. And this is really just for content creation, and what you have for B-roll, what you have for studio or outside, for example, if you have to film something. In a similar way, you can do something when you write blog posts. You have first the idea stage, then you have an outline stage or research stage. You have drafts, edit, and you can use either the properties, the blog properties, or you can use just links. The letters, what I do, I just use links, and then I retrieve any idea that I find interesting, and then I just keep writing and adding to that outline. So I even write entire drafts in outline format, but I just write them all on the same level. So that is for me. Let's see. I saw a question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but let's say, there is, like, I already said something about logbook, about the metadata about the blogs, and those you can basically use in advanced queries. So in Datalog queries, you can say, for example, a page, I want to see all pages that were updated in the last 24 hours, for example. That is something you could do with an advanced query. There's also the logbook entries. So whenever you work on a task and you put it in status doing, then the counter will start to roll. And Bart is asking, can simple queries access logbook entries? Do you happen to know this, Bas? Because I'm actually also curious to this, if it can use some of this metadata, like the created add property or attribute in the advanced queries. Can a simple query access those things, or do you really have to write Datalog queries for those?
I'm not sure. I haven't used them. I did use them because if I do a simple query, I get the data back when I use a page property, like the created add and updated add. So I sometimes use them to sort. Other thing that I hit was usually the created add and updated add I don't find super interesting unless I'm sorting something on like how fresh is it. Normally it's more the journal stuff. And I did notice that you can't really sort the journal things on date, because then you get like all the Wednesdays first, and all the Thursdays first. And then, so I changed my date layout so it's year, month, day, so that I can use a sort there, which I currently use for things like time tracking. Like I write down my hours every day, and once a week I go to a page, and because it's sorted on my journal dates, I can just do my hour trackings in like 2 seconds, because I just get my data from Logseq.
Yeah.
That's the way I use current, but I really wish that that I could use more time-based functions in my queries that I could rely on currently.
Yes. For people who are wondering how to do this right now, so for advanced queries, the logbook entries, I don't know if you can use them. I would imagine using Datalog you can. For now, basically the workaround is this, and I will just share something from me. So what I do a habit tracker. I'm learning Italian right now. I try to make it a habit to write every day. So I have a few things that I track, and this is all as basically page metadata for a journals page. And I will show in a little bit why I do that. But this is just the amount of minutes that I track. You could use something similar. You could say, okay, I want to track maybe time that I invest or that I spend on a customer or a client project, and I need to bill them, for example, per month or whatever. So in that case, I would just log my work sessions with this using properties, using block or page properties. And something else, these are now clickable. So as you can see here, click to edit this page properties. But here I can edit them, but when I hover over an actual page property or block property, you see it's now clickable, because nowadays it creates links. And something else that's neat, and also as per your comment, Bas, for autocomplete, you can now hit double colon, and then you get all the properties that you've used in the past. So I get basically a list. So if I don't know if it's like Italian, like how I wrote it, I can just say here, and this is also all the values I've added in the past. So this could be useful, for example, for systems, because now you have a autofill. So this is already implemented in the latest version. But then, oh, I shouldn't delete them all. Then obviously the question becomes, how do you add them all up? Because using queries, like off the cuff, I don't know if it's possible to do these calculations using queries, but there's already some plugins that can do it for you. So if you go to plugins and let's see, marketplace, and there's property visualizer. Let's see, there's a property visualizer. And there's, let's see, there's the table render. Yeah, so you need to have basically have 3 plugins installed. As you can see here, you need to have the table render plugin installed, the chart render, and then this property visualizer. But then you can do you can generate tables based on that data. So based on your journals page, and you could obviously add some additional properties like client names and stuff like that. So this is definitely something that is for more the adventurous among you, because as with many Logseq plugins, the documentation is not airtight. It's not it's not foolproof, I would say. It definitely takes some technical understanding and some experimentation. But if you want to do this, if you want to leap to basically the next level of using Logseq for data tracking, this is definitely something that you could get started with today. So to recap, use the properties, and then you can feed that data into the plugins that are already available in the marketplace. All right, that was me ranting for a little bit.
Yeah. So I was adventurous enough to check out that plugin. The one thing that I hit with that one was that it doesn't auto-update. So if you want to see the latest data, you have to like rerun a couple of the commands. It's not a big issue, but if you want like a live counter that goes throughout the day, you kind of get stopped. If you do want that, then it becomes time to dive into advanced queries, because you can format your data after the query. It's something that I still wanted to dive in, but because I have been using them less and less, and I didn't need the counter, at least I didn't have anything that I really needed it for right now. I still need to dive in that and to format it. And then you could make like a live table that would update live as well. So if you really need like something that updates frequently, dive deeper into advanced queries. If you go something like, hey, I only need this like once a week and I want a total report that I want to generate, then the property plugins are absolutely awesome.
Yes, absolutely. It's like we're at the frontier still. So we're also, as Logseq, we're learning a lot about how people are using the tool, and then creating basically better functionality step by very little step. Because, for example, properties, I think in the past 6 months, that has really exploded. Before, nobody was really using them. Now a lot of people are talking about it. People are creating videos like you, Bas, creating videos about properties. And then, hey, it happens that you can also feed properties into queries. But then we hit the next roadblock. How do you actually use queries? So that is something we're now diving into. Let's see. We have about 10 more minutes. I saw a question that is very close to my heart, so I want to give it some attention and maybe do a little bit of live demo. So the question is by Torin. The question is, I've been interested in how you use Logseq to learn a new language, as I'm learning both German and Japanese. First of all, learning 2 languages at the same time, kudos. I couldn't do it. But I want to demo very quickly how I would use Logseq to learn languages. Personally, I don't use Logseq. I use Anki. Why? Because I've been using it for 15 years. So I'm quite married to that tool. But I have a very little set of demo data. But I went to my SRS, so space repetition page, and I found 2 things, like 2 sentences that I have saved that I want to still put into Anki. But let's say, what if I wanted to turn these into flashcards within Logseq. So basically, flashcards are also a query, basically. So, and we'll see in a little bit how you can create different inboxes or different buckets of flashcards. But basically, a flashcard is nothing more than a query. And how does it work? So you only need one thing to add to a flashcard, and that is the hashtag card. And let's open that here. And as you can see here, everything that I've tagged as a card get this little, how do you say it, border around it. So this denotes, okay, this is a card, this is a flashcard. And if I go into the flashcards here on the side, so here I can just see all the flashcards that are up for review. It's 56. If I click it, then I see first the parent block, the block that contains the hashtag card, that I see as the question. And then when I click show answers, I see the child blocks. So I can branch this as far as I want. And this is actually a flashcard about how to use queries, so something I want to remember. So how I would review this is, as when I see the question, I first ask myself the question, and then I try to answer it for myself. I give it a and then I train the algorithm, basically. So I say I couldn't answer this, so it's forgotten. Took a while to recall, T, or I remembered it, and then it will be scheduled further into the future. So let's say I want to use this functionality for language learning. So in that case, what I would do is I would say, let's just first turn this into a card. So just add hashtag card. And now this block is tagged with a bunch of values. So it's tagged with to do, it's tagged with Italian, SRS, card. So if I want to retrieve this, let's say I want to only review the cards for Italian, I just write /cards. That will basically create a shortcode that looks a lot like query, but it's just for cards. And then I say, I just want to see the cards for Italian. And click out of the block. And as you can see here, I only see this one card. What if I add a card? So say I want to also have this one. Then you see here in the top right, it's now 2 out of 2, so 2 cards. And I can just click review cards. And now I'm only reviewing the Italian cards. So that is how I would use Logseq for language learning. I'm very particular how I learn languages. I always have on the front of the card, I have my target language. And then on the back of the card, I have the translation, or I have the definition of things I want to, like difficult words for me. And this is just how I review my flashcards. And another thing I would do is just add an audio clip on the front of the card. So what I like to do in Anki is I have this card, and then either I ask my girlfriend to record the audio, or I rip it somewhere from internet, because many sentences I just get from the internet. And I add the audio. So I hear the audio, I see the text, and then for myself, I test myself, what does this sentence mean? Or this one word that I'm stumbling over, what does it mean? Or grammar structure. So I'm having a very active dialogue with myself, and then basically I test myself. So on the surface, it may not look like queries, but this is basically the same system as queries. So you say, I want to see all the cards that have this specific hashtag. I can also just say, I'm going to write a query that have and, let's see, card and Italian, and I'll see these 2 cards. But obviously, in this case, I will also see the answer in this case, whereas in here, I don't see the answer until I click show answer. So that is really a nice way to test myself. So that is a very quick demo based on audience question. Good question, Toran. Let's see. We are coming up. Bus, I don't know if you've been. I think you've been keeping an eye on the chat. Is there anything that caught your attention that you want to end with, or that you want to share
Yeah,
before we
it was
go?
all the way in the beginning. So there was a question that referred to the comparison between query languages and regular expressions. Now, regular expressions are dear to my heart, but are a totally different beast from queries. So, a query is asking something where a computer knows its properties. So, for example, I want to get all the books where the title has, where the title is Ready Systems Red, I think, for example. Uh, but you can combine those. So you can also make a query that says, like, I want where the title starts with red, and that's something that you could write with a regular expression. I'm not sure if Clojure is full regular expression support. I haven't checked, but I believe it does have like limited support. So you have like extended regular expressions and regular ones, and the basic stuff is things like saying it starts with or ends with or has like so many spaces in between. So regular expressions definitely are more meant for filtering text, and queries are more for filtering data. So where there's structured data, then you have to use queries, because regular expressions don't really understand that, or at least they're very difficult to build.
Yes, so that I think that is a very good distinction, because again, we started from the premise we have a database of notes, and that database is built in a few ways. It's having all this metadata as you interact with Logseq, but also by structuring your notes using links and indentation, you very consciously structure your notes database basically, and that is how queries work. Now with regular expressions, as you say, it just looks at the text. It doesn't put any special importance to links or hashtags. It will just look for any combination of text that will meet the requirement of that regular expression. I have seen there is a way doing plain text search using queries, and I wonder if you would use advanced queries. I think I've seen some very lightweight regular expressions, for example, to recognize namespaces. I think there's already what I just linked to earlier this session. There was already a little bit of that in there. So there's basically a hint of regular expressions, but you're not doing regex like full blown as you would maybe do in a terminal window.
No, no, you wouldn't. But usually most people that use regular expressions and extension don't make it too complex, because you're filtering for you already have like a specific subset of data when you do a query and you do a regex on that. So it just usually doesn't have to be very complex. I
Yeah.
also used regular expressions to filter what's called CDR, which is call record data for phone companies. Those are weird. Those are really long strings, and that's where regular expression really shines, because you're going like, hey, I really want this specific stuff, and then you have to use the advanced stuff. But if you use it inside a query language, you usually like already get the title or the author's name, and then your regular expressions very rarely needs to be very complex,
Hmm.
because the complexity is already taken by the query language.
Yes, yes. I think that is a good note to end on. So, query languages, what are they used for? If you have some structure in your graph, that you then use that structure to find back your nodes. That is basically the most simple definition after this hour that I think I can give. There's still lots of questions that are trickling in. I want to show people where they can go if they have questions. So I will go back to screen sharing mode briefly. Go to discuss.logseq.com, and there you will be able to ask your questions, share what you're working on. So I've been trying this for just over a month to push more people towards the forum instead of Discord, because Discord is great if you have a quick question, but if you really want to understand something, I believe a better place is the forum, because you can search the forum. So what I just did before, here, namespace query, and I already had an answer to how I can retrieve all the results within a namespace. In Discord, that is very difficult to do because it's a chat. The data is not indexed properly. And then if you want to participate in the career learning sprint, I really encourage you to start a Learn Log. So here is mine. It's quite long already. Let's see. And what I do is I have answered some of the questions that was last week. So if you want to see what I talked about last week, let's also grab that. Let's see. I also want to share this. So this was the last session that we did last week about how to do learning projects. Then for this week, we have here these resources for simple queries. And then, as you can see here, I've been going through these resources. Let's see, I've been going through these resources and then sharing my notes and also recording actually me going through the materials and taking notes. So if you want to see live in action how someone like me uses Logseq to learn new skills, definitely check out this this thread. What else? Yeah, and then start one for yourself. I really recommend that. And then in the coming days, I'm going to play a little bit with the new Logseq version that will hopefully have the fixed query engine, and that will make it really a joy to use, I think, and make it possible to create much more powerful workflows. Nick is asking about future events. If you, let's see, let me go back quickly to, you're back on camera, Bas, so.
I was just messing with regular expressions in Logseq, and I think I queried everything, so my Logseq kind of broke. But I do get results. So I was just Googling on closure and regular expressions, and there seems to be a specific syntax for it.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure what results I got, because I got too many to see if it's just a lucky shot or good stuff. But it doesn't croak on it, which means that it might work. Need to dive into it a bit more because, as I said, I'm querying too much now.
Oh yeah. If you have feedback for that, definitely reach out to me. And let's see, I'm going back to screen sharing, and then the question by Nick was, how do I subscribe to any future live events? Is there an email list? Yes, there's an email list. So if you go to the blog, let's see. So this is the blog, and then you will get the weekly newsletter if you sign up for that. And then there's also this post where basically you have the links for the live sessions. So these are the Wednesday sessions, and then let's see. I don't have. Oh yeah, here for the Friday gems, because on Friday we have a live session on Zoom. It's not recorded. I'm not publishing it. I'm not publishing it so that everyone can feel free to share their screen, be on camera. Last week was a lot of fun. We live coded 2 or 3 queries, fixed some stuff, ran into the bug with the parent blocks, and now that's getting fixed. So your feedback really is important to make Logseq better. We're over time. Sorry, Bas, for taking up more of your time, but I really want to thank you. As we went into this this chat before, we're really thinking, okay, are we going to have a very structured session, or are we more spitballing, or just free-flowing conversation? I like this free-flowing conversation. Also, as we take questions from people.
Yeah, it was great fun having the quick chat and going through it. I always like live sessions because I get questions or things to think about, and then I can't help myself and I start messing around with it. Pro tip, always use a sandbox page when you're doing weird queries, because now I can just toss away the text file from my file explorer to fix Logseq. And that's what I like about the live sessions, right? Like I get questions, and then the questions spark interest and things like, hey, I haven't tried this one yet, so I'm going to mess with it. Hopefully getting like better answers in the next time when I'm on a session, or maybe even sometimes a whole video.
Yeah. This is basically where growth happens. Like learning is very messy. Obviously, Bus, you pre-record videos, you script it. It's like super polished, but then I like these sessions as well to really challenge ourselves and see what else can we build, what else is interesting for people to see, and then hopefully a few iterations down the line, we'll have another polished video where we can show, okay, this is how you actually build this workflow using queries. So great having you here. I want to thank everyone in the chat for asking questions and helping each other out. I saw quite a bit of that happening, and that is always nice to see. Again, sign up for Friday if you can make it. So that will start on Friday and then at 6 o'clock Central European time. So that is 1 hour from now. It's now 5 o'clock here. And I want to thank everyone. And I will close this call and hopefully see you on Friday. Bye-bye.